Our goal is to help companies become pioneers within the industry, establishing a new quality standard for the semiconductor industry as we move forward. The semiconductor industry is experiencing a period of rapid expansion. In order to meet this challenge, we need to have speed, efficiency, and minimize quality deviations for new materials being introduced so that we can enable the rapid expansion for the industry. What we see now is that on top of this need for materials to have critical quality, we also see that the industry as a whole is required to add capacity to meet the ever-growing demand for devices. This is being driven by applications such as AI, cloud-based services, autonomous vehicles, and many, many more applications. And so we need to respond to that challenge as an industry as we add capacity and make sure there are no materials disruptions as we go forward. The challenge is that many of the parameters that matter most are below the surface. And so in order to really solve this problem and identify the parameters that matter most, suppliers have to aggregate the data together in a way that's sustainable and cost-effective in order to identify those parameters that matter to the device manufacturer's process. Without having an advanced analytics approach to this, there's an ever-increasing cost. As we add more parameters, we add more complexity to our overall manufacturing and supply chain, and this can increase the time to ramp new materials, but also the cost to ramp new materials. And so we have to think about how we do this in a much faster and more advanced way. Athinia offers a secure and collaborative data ecosystem where you can bring all the important parameters from a material together with the device manufacturer's key process steps and enable collaborative data sharing to identify the right parameters. Basically, think of this as finding the needle in the haystack. That enables us to identify the parameters that matter most much more efficiently and in rapid speed, and also focus our resources on the areas that most impact the device manufacturer's performance. Athinia allows suppliers, material suppliers, as well as device manufacturers to come together to be proactive around identifying the key parameters that matter to the device performance early in the process, and then establish a predictive model for how that material impacts the process. So as you go forward and go through the yield ramp, if there are deviations in the process, you can identify those very quickly and respond. This enables everyone within that value chain to go from a reactive approach, which can be lengthy, expensive, and cause major disruptions within the supply chain and overall production, to being proactive, where you're solving these proactively and being able to adapt and adjust much faster. So I think for all of us within this value chain, being able to proactively solve these problems and make the entire materials ramp, whether it's new process, new materials, or existing materials, much faster and more efficient, will make all of us be able to focus on the things that matter most, whether it's optimizing the device integration from a device manufacturer standpoint or from a material supplier standpoint, being able to focus our analytical and our collaboration with our raw material suppliers in a way that really targets performance for the customer. So the reality for both material supplier and device manufacturers is that this quality and materials interaction with fab processes creates a challenge because there are many unknowns that are happening continuously. And so the benefit of having a data ecosystem is that we can collectively learn on the trends that are happening within materials and fab processes and really solve these problems. And the reality is that helps all of us within the value chain, because then we can work on new materials, new technology ramps, new device integrations, the things that really can enable and drive the industry. And that to me is, I think, the exciting part, is if we can solve these very difficult materials to fab process interactions in a way where we're collaborating in a open and secure environment. I think this is a really important question around security and IP protection as we look at establishing a data ecosystem within the industry. First of all, Athinia has the highest level of data security. Coming to the IP topic, the data sharing is enabled by coding and normalizing all of the data. And so you can learn across the ecosystem around the key trends without having any IP contamination. And this is a really key foundational element of how we've designed Athinia to be enabling for the industry, but also allow for each individual company to maintain their IP security. And so one of the key design elements within Athinia is to have collaborative data sharing in a way where you can share data that each company decides, and you have a portal into the data sharing network. However, the actual data sharing is IP protected. And so that gives a way to collaborate across the ecosystem and yet maintain IP protection for the key parameters or materials that matter most. And the autonomy for each company to make decisions on what's shared and how it's shared is really a key enabling capability within the Athinia design. Athinia is the only semiconductor industry-wide many-to-many data platform that enables companies to come together to share data in a way that also has high level of data security and IP security. And this really enables us to solve the materials challenges both now and for the future. From a materials supplier standpoint, being able to identify one parameter that we focus on with our raw material supplier gives us really a chance of designing that raw material to form fit the process. From a device manufacturer, this can be a huge impact. It can enable the yield ramp to move much faster. It can enable higher yields overall, less variation, higher throughput, and the list goes on and on. But being proactive really gives us a chance to get ahead of this without having to go into task force, disrupting the supply chain, having potential for inventory scrap, and ultimately potentially having an impact on the device scrap. And given where the industry is in terms of capacity and the high utilization rates, as an industry, we cannot afford any more materials disruptions. So I personally see this as a very exciting way for us to get ahead of the curve and really enable advancements that we didn't know were possible. Materials quality issues can have a direct impact on scrap events and financial losses to device manufacturers as well as material suppliers. Enabling a proactive data ecosystem, such as Athinia, can help solve that problem. With the combination of COVID plus the acceleration of new applications, we've seen not only an increase in utilization within the semiconductor device manufacturing output, but even a chip shortage that we all see in the press on a day-to-day basis. This creates a significantly higher level of risk aversion for any materials disruptions. The industry needs a solution like Athinia to make sure that we proactively identify any materials interactions or potential disruptions and solve them so that we don't impact the supply chain even more. While we're not the only solution to enable and reduce the chip shortage, we do think we can be a part of the solution moving forward.